Have you ever been astounded, awestruck, or speechless when the Almighty God of heaven has orchestrated impossible events that culminated in an incredible conclusion? Such was the response in 2004 when God introduced Air Force reservist Dennis Swanson to the family of Airman James Habersat at the time of their son's birth. In 2003, the Swanson family had just moved to the outskirts of the Twin Cities to be near Dennis's new employer, a large defense contractor. Dennis was also a technical sergeant in the Air Force Reserve. That fall, when another reservist could not fulfill a deployment slot, Sergeant Swanson received 2 weeks' notice that he would be deployed to Germany. Meanwhile, the 2002 job blight near Washington, D.C. had caused James Habersat Jr. to join the Air Force. About that time, his wife Lindsay had lost their first baby. After basic training, the Habersats were disappointed to learn that James was being assigned to duty at Sembach Air Base, Germany. By late 2003, Airman Habersat was established at his Sembach Work Center. Lindsay found support at Sembach Chapel, where she became part of the music team, and they were expecting a new baby. At his Air Medical Evacuation Squadron, Sergeant Swanson worked irregular shifts on the flight line. He helped configure aircraft to transport wounded military heroes, he drove a supply van, and he shuttled flight medics. Earlier troop rotations had been lodged near Ramstein Air Base, but his rotation was housed 20 miles away at Sembach Air Base. On his first Sunday at Sembach, Dennis visited the chapel, where he found energizing fellowship. He aspired to sing with the music team. He prayed, "Dear God, I want to volunteer, but how can I fit this into my schedule?" God's answer came the next day when the administrative officer asked Sergeant Swanson to manage the squadron's communications assets. The new job required coordination with offices on base that only worked weekdays. Sergeant Swanson was still required to work part-time on the flight line, but not weekends. 2 months later, Sergeant Swanson was assigned to provide computer support, at which time he was authorized a vehicle, and he was too busy to perform the duty he found distasteful, configuring aircraft on the flight line. By December, Dennis had introduced himself to Marcus, the chapel music team leader. Team members soon became his best friends, including the Habersats. Lindsay sang, and James ran the sound. That first night, the Habersats offered Dennis a ride home. Soon, the threesome was spending many hours together, often with other chapel friends. A lonesome bored stranger and the anxious homesick couple found kinship in each other. Dennis and James discussed Air Force career options, computers, and electronic gadgetry. Lindsay and Dennis practiced music together and tested out new songs for the worship team. Dennis voiced his appreciation this way: "I will enjoy being with you for as long as you will put up with me." The Habersats were anxious for the new baby. Lindsay's final trimester was difficult, and she was hospitalized more than once. In mid-January, her health became an issue for the baby, so the doctors induced labor. Baby Devon was born early January 17th. But almost immediately it was discovered that his esophagus did not connect from his throat to his stomach. Prognosis was good that surgery could correct this. However, he needed to be evacuated back to the United States for treatment. Dennis came quickly when he learned of Devon's condition. Upon arrival, he announced, "God brought me to Germany to help you guys." They prayed and planned together. Dennis soon photographed Devon and emailed pictures back to his anxious grandparents, and he initiated a worldwide prayer chain for the baby. At 9 p.m. Saturday, Dennis finally headed for his dorm, while Lindsay complained that he was leaving too soon. So, when Dennis arrived Sunday afternoon, he promised Lindsay that he would ask her permission before leaving that night, which she did not grant until past 11 p.m. Sunday and Monday were filled with planning for the Tuesday evacuation flight. Monday night, Dennis voiced another concern: "I don't know when I will see you again." All three had silently dreaded this reality, but he assured them, "Last year I had 2 business trips to D.C. We will see each other again sometime." Since Dennis now had a van, he drove the Habersats to the military hospital on Tuesday morning for their flight. With one last prayer and promises to keep in touch, they said farewell. At the office, Sergeant Swanson loitered near the flight line operations desk, looking at the flight schedule. The section chief sensed his desire. "Grab your gloves and go help configure that airplane." For some reason, that distasteful duty was exactly what he wanted to do. Baby Devon arrived first in his isolette. Sergeant Swanson helped load him onto the aircraft. Soon Devon's mom and dad arrived. Sergeant Swanson and the Habersats were grateful for a precious few more moments together. Too soon, though, the ground crew was done and the final farewells were said. Though forlorn for his friends, Sergeant Swanson was relieved that the Habersats would soon be with their family support network. Now, with time to reflect, he began to ponder the incredible sequence of events that God had pulled off to make him available to help the Habersats. Why was he even in Germany? At the last minute, he had filled in for a colleague who was medically disqualified. He was only willing to volunteer because of his new employer's generous military leave policy. Being lodged at Sembach was unprecedented at his squadron until his rotation. He had been singled out for special duty that permitted him to have weekends off and to join the music team, and his computer support responsibilities came with a flexible schedule and a vehicle. Plus, Devon arrived at the beginning of a long holiday weekend when Dennis was able to dedicate all his time to serving his friends. Since Sergeant Swanson's squadron would evacuate the Habersats, he was able to intercede for them with the flight crew. Even his familiarity with configuring the aircraft, though unappreciated while gaining it, allowed the three friends one final unexpected moment together. As Sergeant Swanson pondered the sequence of events, he was overwhelmed by the hand of God. Astonishingly, God had worked all these miracles in his life, but not for his benefit. God worked all these miracles in his life just to benefit the Habersats. Safely stateside, the Habersats called back to let their Germany friends know that Devon's surgery would be Thursday. Lindsay was ecstatic. "They let me hold my baby." The worldwide prayer chain for Devon was relieved when word came that his surgery was successful. 1 week later, he was released. Since Devon would need follow-up care, Airman Habersat received a humanitarian reassignment to the D.C. area near their families. James traveled alone back to Germany in late February to ship their belongings. Dennis had planned one last tourist trip before redeploying home when James asked him for help packing. At first, Dennis declined, but then he felt the conviction from God. "I brought you to Germany to be a personal servant to the Habersats." Dennis relented and helped James. While working together, Dennis mentioned his conversation with God, and James reacted, "I don't need a personal servant." But Dennis insisted, "My order was from the Lord." Soon they were finished, and there was still time for Dennis to invite James along on that planned road trip. Lindsay was also awestruck when she contemplated the miracles God had worked in Dennis's life on their behalf. She emailed, "I think of you as Devon's godfather." Dennis was surprised by this honor and puzzled by how to fulfill it, but he choked on his prayers of protest. After what he had just experienced, how dare he tell God that such an honor from this grateful mother was not practical? Sergeant Swanson's trip home included a layover in D.C., and Devon stopped by to say thank you. In the years since, God has sent the Habersats their personal servant on additional occasions. Dennis even brought his family for a visit. Devon is healthy and continues to grow. Lindsay once wrote that Dennis sang with the voice of an angel, although he would protest that compliment. However, the Bible tells of those who welcomed into their homes some stranger who turned out to be an angel. In that sense, the Habersats opened their home and hearts to a stranger whom God sent to minister to them. Dennis likened his experience to a real-life Narnian tale. He was yanked from one world to another to fulfill a miraculous mission. The question to ponder is, which miracle is bigger, sending an angel to Germany or sending Dennis to minister to a shell-shocked young couple at the time of their greatest need? After all, why should only the angels enjoy the opportunity to display the most amazing glory of God?